The night my father died, the town went silent in a way I had never heard before. Not peaceful. Not respectful. Empty. Like something had been stolen from the air. I remember standing outside our house, barefoot on the cold cement, watching the police lights paint everything red and blue. My father's body was still inside. They wouldn't let me see him. They kept saying, "It's better this way, Victor." Better for who? I kept asking the same question in my head while the officers spoke in low voices and my neighbors pretended not to stare. "Accidental fall down the stairs," one of them said. But my father didn't fall. He was strong. Careful. Obsessed with order. He fixed loose tiles the same day they cracked. He never rushed. He never slipped. And yet, they said he slipped. I didn't cry at first. I couldn't. My chest felt locked. Like someone had put a steel door inside me and thrown away the key. Then I saw Mark. He was standing at the end of the driveway, hands in his pockets, head bowed like a perfect friend should. The streetlight above him made his face look pale and worried. Too worried. Mark had been my best friend since we were 10. He knew every corner of our house. He knew where my father kept the land documents. He knew how much that property was worth. Everyone in town did. Our land wasn't just land. It was power. Shops rented from us. Warehouses. Parking lots. Half the market stood on my father's soil. Mark walked up to me slowly. "Vic? I'm so sorry, man." His voice was soft. Controlled. Not shaking. He put his hand on my shoulder. I didn't move. I couldn't feel his hand anyway. "I was with your dad earlier," he continued. "He seemed fine." My stomach tightened. "With him, where?" I asked. Mark hesitated for half a second. "Just half. At the office. He said he wanted to update the property files." Property. That word hit me like a slap. My father had told me just 2 days before, "Victor, never trust anyone with your land. People don't see soil. They see money buried in it." I looked at Mark's face again. Same friend. Same eyes. Same voice. But something in my chest whispered. He knows more than he's saying. The funeral happened 3 days later. The whole town came. My father had helped too many people for them not to show up. He had paid for surgeries, school fees, even weddings. People cried. Mark cried the loudest. He stood next to me, black suit, red eyes, shaking shoulders. "They took a good man," he said into the air. I nodded. Still numb. After the burial, while everyone was eating and talking, Mark leaned close to me. "You know your father trusted me," he said quietly. "He asked me to help manage the property now that he's gone." My heart skipped. What? Mark gave me a sad smile. "He didn't want you stressed. Said you're too young to carry all that weight." Too young? I was 24. I had been working with my father since I was 16. I knew every inch of our land. Yet suddenly, I was too young. That night, after everyone left, I went into my father's study. His chair was still pulled out like he had just stood up. The smell of his cologne was still in the air. I opened the drawers. The land documents were gone. My breath stopped. I searched again. Slower. Then faster. Then like a madman. Nothing. No original papers. No ownership files. No contracts. I sat on the floor, my back against the cabinet, and finally, I cried. Not loud. Just silent, broken breaths that hurt my throat. The next morning, Mark came over with coffee. "Victor, listen," he said, sitting across from me. "The lawyers are coming today. We need to organize everything." "Where are the papers?" I asked. He blinked. "Your father gave them to me last week." My hands clenched. "He never told me." Mark sighed. "He didn't want you worrying." There it was again. That same line. Too young. Too weak. Too emotional. By evening, I found out the truth. One of my father's tenants pulled me aside. "Victor, I shouldn't say this, but your friend Mark has been going around telling people the land is his now." My ears rang. "What?" "He says your father signed it over before he died." The world tilted. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. My father's warnings. Mark's half-second pauses. The missing papers. And one sentence kept repeating in my head. He didn't just lose my father, he gained everything. I wasn't ready to accept it yet. But deep down, something dark was waking up inside me. And it wasn't grief anymore. It was hunger. For the truth. For justice. For revenge. The first thing I did the next morning was visit my father's office. Not because I wanted answers. Because I needed proof. The office smelled like dust and old paper. The kind of smell that only years of business and secrets can create. His desk was still exactly the same. Pen aligned. Files stacked. Chair pushed in. Except for one thing. The top drawer was unlocked. My father always locked that drawer. Always. I opened it slowly. Inside were copies of land maps, and one missing space where the original master file should have been. The file that decided who owned everything. I closed my eyes. Mark. I walked to the window and stared at the market below. People were already opening shops. Laughing. Living. While my world was being stolen quietly. That's when I heard footsteps. I turned. Mark stood in the doorway. "Vic," he said, smiling like nothing was wrong. "I thought I'd find you here." I didn't smile back. "You come here often now?" He shrugged. "Someone has to keep things running." My jaw tightened. "Things," I repeated. He walked in and leaned against my father's desk. The same desk where my dad used to sit and drink black coffee and tell me, "This land will protect you if you protect it." Mark looked comfortable there. Too comfortable. "Victor," he said, lowering his voice. "I know this is hard. But your father trusted me. He knew I could handle the business side." "And he didn't trust me?" I asked. Mark's smile flickered. "He didn't want you carrying stress." That word again. Stress. As if losing my father wasn't already killing me. I stared at him. "Did he sign the land over to you?" I asked. Mark paused. "Just long enough." "Yes." One word. Clean. Sharp. A lie dressed like truth. My chest burned. "Can I see the papers?" I asked. Mark's eyes moved to the window, then back to me. "They're with the lawyer." Of course they were. Always somewhere I couldn't reach. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face. Not dead. Not weak. But warning me. "Victor, never trust anyone with your land." At 3:17 a.m., I got out of bed and went to the storage room. That's where my father kept old junk. Broken chairs. Rusted shelves. Old photo albums. And one small metal box. I remembered it from when I was a kid. He used to keep important things in there. I broke the lock. Inside were old documents. Receipts. Letters. And then, I saw it. A copy of a will. Not the one Mark talked about. A different one. Dated 6 months ago. I sat on the floor and read it with shaking hands. It said, "I, Thomas Hale, leave all my property, land, and business assets to my son, Victor Hale." No mention of Mark. No shared ownership. No transfer. My breath caught. Then I noticed something else. A handwritten note at the bottom. "Victor, if anything happens to me suddenly, do not trust Mark. He knows too much." My heart started pounding so hard it hurt. My father knew. He knew Mark was dangerous. And he still ended up dead. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I got calm. Too calm. The next day, I went to the courthouse to check the property transfer. The clerk pulled up the records. And there it was. Ownership had already been transferred. To Mark. Signed 2 days before my father died. I leaned closer. The signature? It looked like my father's. But something felt off. The curve on the T was wrong. The pressure on the last letter was too heavy. My father had shaky hands near the end. This signature was strong. Forced. Fake. I walked out of the courthouse feeling like my bones had turned into glass. He didn't just steal my land. He stole my father's name. That evening, Mark invited me to dinner. "Just us," he said. "Like old times. Old times. Before lies. Before blood. Before greed." I went anyway. His house was bigger now. Renovated. New car outside. My father's money at work. We sat across from each other at a long table. Steak. Wine. Candlelight. Like he was celebrating something. "To your father," Mark said, raising his glass. I stared at him. "To my father," I repeated. We drank. Then I put the glass down slowly. "Mark, did you kill him?" Silence. The candle flickered. His face went still. Then he laughed. "Vic, that's insane." I leaned forward. "Did you?" He stood up. "Your grief is making you paranoid." I stood too. "My grief is making me see clearly." His eyes hardened. "You should be careful what you accuse people of," he said. I smiled. Not friendly. Not weak. Dangerous. "I am being careful," I said. Very careful. That night, when I left his house, I already knew something. This wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be a war. And Mark had no idea. I had just declared it. I didn't go home after leaving Mark's house. I drove. No destination. Just movement. Because if I stopped, my thoughts would catch me. And my thoughts were sharp enough to cut. Every red light felt like an accusation. Every dark street looked like a memory. My father's voice kept playing in my head like a warning siren. Do not trust Mark. By the time the sun started to rise, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him again. I was going to outthink him. The first rule my father taught me about business was simple. Never fight in the open. You fight in the shadows first. So I went to the shadows. I started with people Mark didn't know I still talked to. Old tenants. Former employees. A retired clerk from the land office. I didn't accuse Mark. I didn't threaten anyone. I just asked questions. Soft ones. Careful ones. Did my father ever seem afraid? Did Mark ever ask you about the property before my dad died? Did anything strange happen that week? At first, everyone was cautious. Then one man cracked. His name was Elias. He had rented a warehouse from my father for 15 years. He looked over his shoulder before speaking. Victor, your friend came to me 2 weeks before your father died. My chest tightened. What did he want? Elias swallowed. He asked if I knew where your father kept the original deeds. He said your dad was planning to sell everything. Sell everything. A lie. My father never planned to sell. What else? I asked. He offered me money, to say later that your father told people Mark was taking over. I felt something cold slide down my spine. Did you take it? Elias shook his head. No. But someone else probably did. I thanked him and left. That night, I wrote everything down in a notebook. Names. Dates. Times. Words. Not proof yet. But a pattern. And patterns are how predators get caught. The next step was the signature. I needed to prove it was fake. So I went to the only person who knew my father's handwriting better than anyone else. My aunt. His sister. She lived 2 hours away. I drove there in silence, rehearsing what I'd say. When I showed her the document, she didn't need more than 5 seconds. That's not your father's signature, she said. My breath hitched. Why? She pointed. He never pressed this hard on paper. And he never looped the H like that. This was copied, badly. Copied. I took a photo of the signature with my phone. Then I showed her the will I found in the metal box. She read it slowly. Then her eyes filled. He knew, she whispered. That night, back in my apartment, I stared at my wall until an idea formed. Not revenge yet. Not punishment. A trap. Mark liked control. Liked feeling smarter. So I was going to make him feel safe. The next morning, I called him. Mark, I said softly. I've been thinking. About what? He asked. About everything. About my dad. About the land. About you. Silence. Then, okay. I don't want to fight, I said. I don't have the energy. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. I'm glad to hear that, Vic. I want to help you run the business, I continued. Like partners. There it was. The sound of victory in his voice. That's very mature of you. Mature. He always liked that word. We met that afternoon at the office. I wore my calm face. My broken face. The one people trust. I'm in, I said. But I want to learn everything first. Mark smiled. The kind of smile you give when you think someone just surrendered. Of course, he said. I'll show you how everything works. For the next 2 weeks, I played the role. The obedient son. The lost kid. The grateful partner. I let him teach me. Let him talk. Let him brag. And Mark, he loved to talk. He talked about deals. About money. About how people were stupid. And sometimes, he talked too much. One night, after too much wine, he leaned back in his chair and said, Your father was old school. Didn't understand how the world really works. My jaw tightened. What do you mean? He waved his hand. He trusted people too easily. I kept my voice steady. Like you? Mark smiled. Especially me. That was the first time I saw it clearly. Not guilt. Not fear. Pride. The second time came a week later. We were reviewing documents when he said casually, You know, if your dad had just signed everything properly, things would have been simpler. My fingers paused on the page. What do you mean, properly? Mark looked up. Realized he'd said too much. Then covered it with a laugh. Just business talk. But I had heard it. Signed properly. Not signed at all. That night, I recorded our meetings on my phone. Every word. Every pause. Every mistake. And Mark kept making them. Because he thought I was broken. He thought I was harmless. He thought the war was over. But in my mind, it was just beginning. And soon, he was going to help me destroy him with his own voice. Mark didn't know it, but every time he talked, I was collecting pieces of him. Not his money. Not his property. His ego. And ego is the easiest thing to weaponize. I started asking him questions that made him feel smart. Questions with no risk. Why did my dad keep everything so complicated? How do you always know when to move first? What would you have done differently if you were him? Mark loved that. He leaned back. Smiled. Explained. Like a teacher. Like a king. One night, after another long meeting, he poured himself a drink and said, You know, Vic, people like your father get replaced. That's how the world works. Replaced? I asked. Outdated, he said. Too slow. Too emotional. My fingers tightened around my glass. Emotional gets you killed in business. Killed. The word hung in the air. He didn't notice. But I did. A few days later, I invited him to my apartment. I made it feel normal. Pizza. Music. Old photos on the table. Nostalgia is another trap. He picked up a picture of us from high school. Man, remember when you used to follow me everywhere, he laughed. I forced a smile. Yeah. And now look, he said. I'm basically running your father's empire. My stomach turned. You earned it, I said quietly. He nodded. I did. Then he added, without thinking. Some people don't step aside unless you push them. My heart thumped. Push them how? I asked. Mark took a sip. However you have to. Silence. The music kept playing. He stared at the photo. Then, slowly, he realized what he'd said. He looked at me. Our eyes met. For 1 second, his mask slipped. Then he smiled again. Business talk, he said. But I had it. Recorded. Clear. The next phase of the plan was simple. I needed him on camera. Not secretly. Openly. Confident. So I told him I wanted to do something for my father. A memorial video, I said. For the town. For the business partners. Mark liked that idea. Good for PR, he said. Exactly. We set up a small interview-style recording in the office. Lights. Chairs. Camera. I asked him questions in front of the lens. Soft ones. What kind of man was my father? How did he prepare you to lead? What lessons did you learn from him? Mark relaxed. He spoke like a hero. Then I changed the angle. What do you think really caused his death? I asked. Mark hesitated. Just a breath. Stress, he said. The pressure of responsibility. Did he ever talk about giving up control? I asked. Mark smiled. He didn't have a choice. The room went cold. What do you mean? I asked. Mark laughed nervously. I mean, the situation forced his hand. Forced. Hand. Signature. I leaned forward. Did he want to sign everything to you? Mark paused. The camera kept rolling. He swallowed. I helped him see what was necessary. Necessary. My pulse thundered in my ears. And what if he didn't want to? I asked. Mark's jaw tightened. He looked away from the camera. Then back. Then things would have gotten messy. Messy. That was his word for death. After the shoot, he clapped me on the back. Good stuff, Vic. People will respect this. I smiled. They will, I said. That night, I listened to the recordings again and again. Every word. Every pause. Every crack in his voice. He didn't confess directly. But he revealed enough. Intent. Control. Manipulation. Now I just needed one thing. A witness. And I knew exactly who to use. Elias. The tenant. I called him and told him the truth. Everything. The fake signature. The will. The recordings. There was silence on the line. Then he said, Victor, I think I know something else. My heart stopped. What? The night your father died. I saw Mark's car outside his house. I closed my eyes. Are you sure? Very. He had never been invited there that late. Never. The next day, I brought Elias to my apartment. I showed him the will. The recordings. He listened. And when he finished, he looked at me and said, he didn't just steal from you, Victor. He erased your father. And that was it. The final piece. Now I had the real will. A fake signature. Recordings of Mark talking too much. A witness placing him at the scene. I wasn't going to the police yet. Not until I could make him fall publicly. Because prison wasn't enough. I wanted him exposed. Broken. Remembered as what he really was. And I already knew how to do it. Because Mark loved attention. And the town loved drama. So I started planning something bigger than a courtroom. Something he couldn't hide from. Something live. Something that would end him. In front of everyone. The town loved events. Not because they were exciting. But because they were public. And anything public had the power to turn private sins into permanent shame. So I gave the town exactly what it wanted. A memorial. Not just for my father. But for the business he built. I told Mark we should host a legacy night at the community hall. A celebration of my father's life, his land, his work. Mark loved it. Great PR, he said. Shows unity. Unity. The word tasted fake in my mouth. We sent invitations to everyone. Business partners. Tenants. Lawyers. Reporters. And most importantly, I made sure the local news station agreed to live stream it. Mark didn't question that. He liked cameras. He liked being seen. He liked looking like a hero. For the next week, I acted like everything was normal. I laughed at his jokes. I shook his hand. I let him feel powerful. And while he felt powerful, I sharpened the knife. The night of the event, the hall was packed. Lights everywhere. Cameras set up in the corners. People in black suits and dresses, whispering, watching. A giant photo of my father stood behind the stage. Smiling. Alive? Watching. Mark stood beside me, adjusting his tie. Nervous? He asked. I smiled. Only about honoring him properly. Mark patted my shoulder. You're doing great, Vic. The lights dimmed. The host announced us. Tonight, we remember a man who built more than land. He built lives. Applause. I walked onto the stage first. The microphone felt cold in my hand. I looked at the crowd. So many faces. So many people my father had helped. My throat tightened. But I didn't stop. Thank you all for being here, I said. My father believed in fairness. In honesty. In doing the right thing, even when no one was watching. Mark nodded beside me. Perfect timing. I also want to thank the man who stepped up after his death, I continued. My best friend. Mark. More applause. Mark stepped forward. Confident. Smiling. He took the mic. Thank you, Victor. Your father was a mentor to me. A guide. A friend. And I promised to protect everything he built. Protect. I watched him say it. Lie. Then I took the mic back. Mark, I said softly, would you mind sitting down with me for a moment? He looked surprised. But he nodded. 2 chairs were placed center stage. The cameras zoomed in. This was supposed to be a short Q&A. At least, that's what Mark thought. We Saturday. I turned to him. Mark, when did you last see my father alive? He answered quickly. 2 days before his death. At the office. I nodded. And did he seem afraid? Mark frowned. Afraid? No. Confused? No. Under pressure? Mark hesitated. Just a little. He was stressed. The word again. Stressed. I leaned closer. Did he tell you he wanted to give you everything? Mark smiled. He trusted me. I nodded slowly. Trusted you enough to sign everything over? Yes. I reached under my chair. And pulled out a folder. I didn't open it yet. I just placed it on my lap. Mark, do you recognize this? I asked. He glanced at it. Looks like paperwork. Specifically, I said, my father's signature. Mark's eyes flicked to the cameras. Then back to me. Of course, he said. He signed many things. I opened the folder. And held up 2 pages. Side by side. One of these is real, I said. One of these isn't. A murmur moved through the crowd. Mark's smile tightened. Which is which? He asked. You tell me, I said calmly. He leaned in. His eyes scanned both signatures. His face changed. Not much. But enough. The crowd leaned forward. The left one, he said. I nodded. Wrong. The hall went silent. I turned to the screen behind us. And the real will appeared. With my father's signature. Then the fake transfer document appeared. Next to it. Side by side. The differences were clear. The pressure. The curves. The spacing. People started whispering. Mark swallowed. I turned back to him. Why did you forge my father's name, Mark? Gasps. Mark laughed. A short, sharp sound. This is insane, he said. You're emotional, Victor. Emotional. Always that word. I nodded. Maybe, I said. But emotions don't change facts. I pressed a button on the remote. And the audio played. Mark's voice filled the hall. Some people don't step aside unless you push them, however you have to. The crowd froze. Mark's face went pale. I pressed play again. Your dad was old school. Didn't understand how the world really works. Whispers grew louder. Mark stood up. This is taken out of context. I stood too. Then explain the context. He opened his mouth. No words came out. I leaned toward the mic. Mark, did you push my father? Silence. The cameras zoomed in on his face. Sweat. Tension. Fear. For the first time, Mark didn't look powerful. He looked hunted. And I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The hall felt like it stopped breathing. Hundreds of eyes were locked on Mark. The cameras were close enough to catch every twitch in his jaw. Every blink. Every lie forming behind his eyes. I held the microphone steady. Mark, I said softly, you've had a lot of time to prepare for this moment. He looked at me like he wanted to laugh and scream at the same time. You're setting me up, he said. This is a show. I nodded. Yes, I said. It is. Then I turned toward the side of the stage. And every good show needs a witness. The doors at the back of the hall opened. Slowly, a man walked in. Older. Nervous. Eyes scanning the room like he wanted to disappear. It was Elias. The tenant. The crowd whispered. Mark's head snapped toward him. What is this? Mark said. Elias stepped closer to the stage. I handed him the microphone. His hands were shaking. But his voice was clear. I saw Mark's car outside Mr. Hale's house the night he died. The room exploded into noise. Mark turned white. That's a lie, he shouted. Elias swallowed. I never went there at night before. Not once. But that night, his car was parked right across the street. Mark shook his head violently. You're paid to say this. Elias looked at him. No, he said. I'm scared to say this. The difference mattered. I took the mic again. Mark, I said, you told everyone my father died from stress. Mark laughed weakly. That's what the police said. Then why were you there? I asked. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. I was checking on him. After midnight? I asked. More whispers. More cameras zooming in. Mark's control was slipping. I was worried, he said. About what? I asked. He snapped. About the business. I leaned in. No, I said quietly. You were worried about the papers. The word hit him like a punch. I pressed the remote again. Another audio clip played. Mark's voice filled the hall. If he doesn't sign, things get messy. Gasps. Mark's face went red. Then pale. Then tight. He ran his hand through his hair. This is edited, he said. You're twisting everything. I looked at him. No, I said. You did that yourself. The host tried to step in. But I raised my hand. This is my father's story, I said. Let it finish. I turned back to Mark. You said he didn't have a choice. Mark looked at the floor. You said you helped him see what was necessary. He didn't answer. I stepped closer. Mark, did my father want to give you his land? His jaw moved. No sound came out. The hall was silent. I leaned in. Did he? Mark closed his eyes. For 1 second. And in that second, he lost. No, he said. The word barely escaped his mouth. But it did. The crowd gasped. I took a step back. So you forced him, I said. Mark looked up. I didn't mean to. Too late. The cameras caught everything. The hesitation. The crack. The truth leaking out. I turned to the audience. My father didn't choose this, I said. It was taken from him. Mark dropped into the chair. His shoulders collapsed. Not powerful anymore. Not confident. Just small. Broken. The reporters were already talking into their phones. Live updates. Headlines being written in real time. Mark whispered, Victor, stop. I looked at him. And for the first time, he looked afraid of me. Not angry. Not proud. Afraid. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. Because now, it was time for the final question. The one that would destroy him completely. The room was so quiet I could hear the cameras clicking. Mark sat there, breathing fast, his chest rising and falling like he was drowning on dry land. This was the moment. The edge of the cliff. I stepped closer to him, slow enough that every step felt heavy. Mark, I said softly, you said my father didn't have a choice. He didn't look up. You said things would get messy if he didn't sign. Still nothing. I leaned in. So tell everyone here. My voice dropped. What did you do when he refused? Mark's fingers curled into fists. His jaw tightened so hard I thought it might crack. Victor, he whispered. Don't. The cameras zoomed in. The crowd leaned forward. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. What did you do, Mark? He swallowed. Once. Twice. Then his eyes filled. I just wanted him to understand, he said. Understand what? I asked. That the business needed to move on. And when he didn't? I said. Mark shook his head. I didn't mean for it to go that far. That was it. The sentence everyone heard. The sentence that destroyed him. I didn't mean for it to go that far. A wave of sound moved through the hall. Not shouting. Not applause. Shock. Real, heavy shock. I straightened. So it did go far, I said. Mark covered his face with his hands. I just pushed him, he said. He lost his balance. My heart pounded. You pushed him, I repeated. I didn't know he'd fall like that. Mark cried. The stairs were right there. I just wanted him to stop arguing. Every camera in the room caught it. The words. The tears. The truth. I took a step back. And let him talk. Because people always talk when they think it's already over. He was stubborn, Mark said, breaking down. He wouldn't listen. He kept saying the land stays with Victor. With you. He wouldn't change it. My throat burned. He said that? I asked. Mark nodded, sobbing. Yes. That was my father. Even at the end. Protecting me. I turned to the audience. He died standing up for what was right, I said. Then I turned back to Mark. And you killed him trying to steal it. Mark dropped to his knees. I didn't mean to. But meaning didn't matter anymore. The truth was out. Live. Unstoppable. Sirens began to wail outside the hall. Somebody had already called the police. Reporters were speaking into microphones. This is breaking news. Confession live on camera? Property tycoon's son exposes murderer. Mark looked up at me. His face was wet. His eyes were empty. Victor, please. I felt something inside me loosen. Not anger. Not hate. Release. The weight I'd been carrying since the night my father died finally shifted. I leaned down. And whispered so only he could hear. You didn't just lose the land, Mark. You lost the story. Then I stood up straight. And waited for the officers to come. Because the war was over. And I had won it. The sound of sirens grew louder, cutting through the stunned silence in the hall. The crowd parted automatically as 2 police officers stepped onto the stage. Mark tried to rise, but his knees buckled. His hands shook uncontrollably as he looked at me, searching for any sign of mercy. Mark Hale, one officer said, his voice firm, you are under arrest for the death of Thomas Hale, and for forgery of official documents. The words hit him like a freight train. His eyes darted to the audience, to the cameras, to me. Nothing. No escape. No denial could save him now. He looked down at his trembling hands. I didn't mean to, he whispered. The crowd fell silent. Every reporter was recording. Every camera was rolling. Every eye fixed on him as the weight of his action sank in. I stepped closer, my voice calm but unwavering. You didn't mean to, Mark. But you did. And now the world knows who you really are. Mark's face turned pale. He tried to speak again, but the officers gently guided him to stand. One hand on his arm, the other on his shoulder. He was alive, but broken. Completely exposed. I turned back to the audience. My father trusted honesty. He trusted people who deserved it. And while he's gone, I will make sure that trust is honored. Let this be a lesson. Greed has a price, and justice always finds a way. The crowd erupted into applause, but this wasn't celebration. This was acknowledgement. Respect. Relief. The town had witnessed truth triumph over deception. I stepped off the stage quietly. My chest felt lighter than it had in months. The anger that had burned inside me since the night my father died had finally been released. Not with violence, not with threats, but with patience, planning, and the ultimate truth. Outside, the cool night air hit me like a cleansing wave. The sirens faded into the distance. Mark was in the back of a police car now, head hung low, defeated. The empire he tried to steal from me was intact. And my father's legacy was safe. I closed my eyes for a moment. I thought of him. My father. Strong. Wise. Caring. And proud of me, I hoped. Tonight, justice wasn't just served. It was witnessed. It was undeniable. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. The war was over. And I had won it. The night after Mark's arrest, I walked through the empty streets of the town. The lights from the shops reflected on the wet pavement. People were quiet, some nodding as they saw me pass. They knew what had happened. Everyone did. I stopped outside my father's old office. The building stood tall, silent, full of memories. I ran my hand along the brick wall and remembered the first day my father showed me the land, teaching me every corner, every detail. He had been preparing me for this day, unknowingly, for my entire life. Inside, the office smelled of paper, dust, and old leather, like home. I sat at my father's old desk and opened the drawer where he used to keep small notes, reminders, and sometimes, secret messages. I found a folded piece of paper I hadn't seen before. It read, Victor, one day, you will see the truth. Stand strong. Do what is right. Always. I smiled softly, letting a tear slide down my cheek. He had known, even in his final days, that I would carry on his legacy. That I would not let greed and lies win. The next morning, news outlets broadcasted the story repeatedly. The headline screamed, Son exposes murderer, justice served live, and Mark Hale arrested, town witnesses truth triumph. People came to my father's memorial not just to mourn, but to celebrate. They shook my hand, thanked me, some even bowed slightly, acknowledging the courage it took to face betrayal so calmly, so cleverly. I knew this wasn't about fame. It was about justice, respect, and restoring what had been taken from my family. The land, my father's name, the trust of our community, everything was back where it belonged. And Mark? He would spend years reflecting on what his arrogance had cost him. Sitting at my father's desk, the evening sun casting warm light through the window, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The sleepless nights, the plotting, the quiet fear, it was all worth this moment of clarity. Justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about balance, restoring the world to its rightful order. And as I closed the office door behind me, I whispered into the empty room, "We did it, Dad. I didn't fail you." For the first time in months, I felt peace. Because the truth had been revealed. The lies exposed. And the man who tried to destroy us had been undone, not by anger, but by patience, intelligence, and unwavering determination. This was my father's legacy. This was my victory. Victor had returned to his father's office the morning after the legacy night, but this time, he wasn't alone. Every shadow in the room seemed heavier, every draft of wind through the window carried whispers of the past. He ran his fingers across the old wooden desk, feeling the grooves and scratches, remnants of years when his father's hands had touched it, when his father had made decisions that shaped not just the land, but the lives of everyone connected to it. The sun filtered in weakly, catching dust motes dancing in the air. Victor's mind wasn't on the dust, or the office, or even the papers scattered in neat stacks. His mind was on Mark. On the man who had stolen his father's name, his property, his life. And now, after the public humiliation and live confession, Mark was weak, but not yet completely defeated. He still breathed arrogance, even in panic. That arrogance was dangerous. Victor knew it. He picked up his phone and reviewed the recordings one more time. The audio of Mark's own voice saying, "Some people don't step aside unless you push them, however you have to," made Victor's blood run cold. But it wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. Every syllable, every pause, every hesitation in that voice was ammunition. Every word could be used to finish the plan he had carefully crafted for months. Victor leaned back in the chair, closing his eyes for a moment. He could almost hear his father's calm, measured voice. "Patience, Victor. The predator always falls when he believes he's the hunter." The first thing Victor decided that day was to secure every angle. He needed no surprises, no loose ends. Mark had allies, and some of them were dangerous. People who had profited from his father's death. People who would try to intimidate Victor if given the chance. He started by visiting the warehouse where Elias had kept his old equipment. The place was dusty, quiet, and smelled faintly of rust and oil. Victor walked slowly, every step deliberate, examining the surroundings as if they were part of a chessboard. He pulled out the metal box his father had kept for secrets. Inside, besides the will, were notes about Mark's habits, financial ledgers, letters, evidence that could implicate others in the corruption surrounding his father's property. Victor had learned long ago that revenge wasn't just about confronting the enemy, it was about controlling the narrative, controlling every move, every observation, and every piece of information. He compiled everything meticulously, creating layers of evidence so complex that no one could argue, no one could deny, and no one could escape accountability. As he worked, the tension in the air felt almost tangible. He imagined Mark pacing in his apartment, panicking over news stories, whispers in the town, and the slowly tightening net of exposure Victor was weaving. Mark thought the worst was over. He thought the public confession had ended it. But Victor had only just begun. Victor's mind went back to the night he first discovered the will. The moment of realization, the cold shock of betrayal, and the flicker of determination that had ignited inside him. He remembered pacing his apartment for hours, imagining every possible scenario, every strategy to reclaim his father's legacy and make Mark pay. Every plan, every move, had been designed with one goal: absolute psychological domination. Now, sitting in the dim light of the warehouse, Victor allowed himself a brief smile. He had set the stage. The town had witnessed the first act of justice. But the final act, the one that would seal Mark's fate and restore everything his father had built, required more. He started by contacting key individuals quietly. Business partners who had been deceived, former employees who had lost trust, journalists who were hungry for the truth. Every contact was precise, every message calculated. Victor didn't just want justice, he wanted a spectacle that would ensure Mark's reputation, credibility, and influence evaporated completely. Days passed in a blur. Victor meticulously prepared. He created false leads, planted documents, and even manipulated Mark's perception, letting him believe he had regained some control. Every casual meeting Victor attended, every phone call, every interaction with Mark was a layer of the trap. He smiled in public, laughed with Mark, and even feigned moments of doubt and weakness, just enough to lower Mark's guard. Victor's obsession with precision extended to timing. He observed Mark's routines, noting when he left for business meetings, when he drank alone, and when he flaunted his power to the community. Every predictable action became a potential point of exposure. Victor knew Mark's ego would betray him. And it did. One evening, Victor staged a private meeting, under the guise of reconciling and consolidating business operations. Mark, desperate to feel powerful again, agreed. Victor brought a camera, positioned discreetly, recording every movement, every word. Mark spoke freely, boasting about his strategies, subtly revealing manipulation, deceit, and threats he had made in the past. Victor listened silently, heart steady, knowing that each sentence, each slip of the tongue, was another thread in the web he had been spinning. As the night deepened, Victor executed the most critical phase. He orchestrated subtle leaks to the press, anonymous tips to authorities, and social media posts hinting at shocking revelations. Mark's paranoia escalated. He started seeing shadows in every corner, imagined conspiracies where none existed. Victor watched from a distance, noting every tremor, every nervous twitch. The psychological pressure was mounting perfectly. Victor's next move required precision timing. He invited Mark to a supposedly private dinner, presenting it as a casual discussion about the business's future. The venue was a private hall, cameras hidden behind curtains, microphones planted strategically. Victor asked questions with innocent tones. Do you remember the day my father insisted on reviewing the contracts? How did you feel when he refused your suggestions? Every question was designed to lead Mark to confess, to reveal the truth under the guise of casual conversation. Mark's arrogance made him speak freely. Every brag, every detail of manipulation, every admission of control over Victor's father's final days was captured. Victor remained calm, smiling faintly, letting the storm build internally. The psychological trap was nearly complete. Mark had no idea he was constructing his own downfall with his own words. Victor's patience, which had been tested for months, was now yielding results beyond expectation. Each carefully planned interaction brought Mark closer to complete exposure. The town would see him for what he truly was, not just a usurper of property, but a man who had betrayed, manipulated, and indirectly caused the death of someone who trusted him implicitly. The climax, Victor knew, would be dramatic. It needed to be public. It needed to hit where it would hurt most: pride, reputation, and credibility. Every detail of the trap was ready. Every recording, every witness, every document was secured. Victor's meticulous planning meant there would be no escape for Mark, no way to spin the story, no allies who could intervene. Victor allowed himself a moment to reflect. This wasn't just revenge. It was a reclamation of justice, of honor, and of everything his father had worked for. He had endured months of emotional turmoil, sleepless nights, and the constant gnawing fear of making a mistake. Now, standing on the precipice of the final act, he felt calm, almost serene. And yet, the tension remained unbearable. The anticipation, the thrill of watching the pieces fall into place, the knowledge that the ultimate confrontation was near, these feelings were intoxicating. Victor knew he had the power. Mark had no idea. The predator had become the prey, and Victor was ready to watch the transformation. The hall where the final confrontation would occur was being prepared meticulously. Cameras installed at every angle, lighting adjusted to capture every subtle expression, every twitch of emotion. Victor coordinated with journalists, legal advisors, and key witnesses, ensuring that when the moment came, there would be no doubt, no question, and no possibility of interference. Victor sat alone in the empty hall one night, reviewing every plan, every step. He imagined Mark's reaction, his arrogance crumbling, his lies exposed, his fear visible to all. The thought sent a shiver down Victor's spine. He relished it, not in cruelty, but in the justice of witnessing truth triumph over deception. As dawn approached, Victor finalized every detail. The stage was set, the trap ready, and Mark unknowingly walking straight into it. The final act would be public, undeniable, and complete. And Victor, for the first time in months, allowed himself to smile fully, knowing that the culmination of patience, intelligence, and psychological mastery would deliver the ultimate reckoning. Victor leaned back in his chair, the dim light casting shadows across the room. The months of planning, the sleepless nights, the endless mental calculations, it had all led to this point. The trap was meticulously set. Every recording, every document, every witness aligned perfectly. Mark didn't suspect a thing. For the first time since his father's death, Victor allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He thought of his father's words: patience, Victor. The predator falls when he believes he's the hunter. And that's exactly what had happened. Mark had hunted, manipulated, and stolen, believing he was untouchable. Now, he was the prey, and Victor was ready to strike. He reviewed the files one last time. The audio of Mark's own voice confessing manipulation, the falsified documents, Elias's witness statements, all of it formed an unbreakable chain of truth. No spin, no lies, no chance of escape. Victor smiled faintly. Justice wasn't a fleeting moment, it was a spectacle, and the world would see it. Victor took a deep breath. The city outside was unaware, blissfully ignorant, as the stage for the final confrontation was set. Cameras, witnesses, and reporters were all in place. Every detail was precise. Every angle accounted for. The storm that would bring Mark to his knees was ready to be unleashed. And yet, Victor remained calm. He wasn't driven by hatred anymore. He was driven by clarity. By justice. by the restoration of everything his father had built and protected. The anger that had burned for months had transformed into focused power, a laser-sharp determination that could not be broken. He whispered to himself, a quiet vow in the stillness of the empty hall, "This ends the way it should, Mark. No excuses, no lies. The world will see the truth." Victor stood, walking slowly toward the large windows overlooking the town. He could almost imagine Mark's face when the first piece of evidence would hit him, the realization that his arrogance, greed, and manipulation had led him straight into Victor's carefully crafted trap. That moment was coming. And Victor was ready. With the planning complete and every move anticipated, Victor finally allowed himself a long exhale. The storm was coming, and when it hit, there would be no turning back. Part 11 had reached its logical end. The preparation was complete, the trap set, and the ultimate showdown was waiting. Victor knew one thing with absolute certainty: the reckoning would be unforgettable. The town hall was packed, buzzing with whispers and anticipation. Cameras from local news stations were set up at every angle, microphones hidden strategically, and every witness Victor had carefully selected was in position. Mark walked in, unaware that this night would destroy everything he thought he controlled. Victor greeted him with a calm smile, extending his hand. "Mark, thank you for coming. Let's discuss the future of my father's legacy." Mark shook his hand nervously, trying to mask the rising tension. "Of course, Victor. Let's work this out." Victor motioned for the hall to quiet down, then turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is about truth. About justice. About what happens when greed and betrayal are finally exposed." He pressed a button, and the first recording played. Mark's own voice filled the room. "Some people don't step aside unless you push them, however you have to." Gasps filled the hall. Mark's face drained of color. He tried to interrupt, stammering, but Victor raised a hand, calm, commanding. The next recording played, Mark boasting about forging Victor's father's documents, manipulating tenants, and covering up the truth about the night Thomas Hale had died. Every lie, every deceit captured perfectly. The audience murmured in disbelief, the evidence undeniable. Victor then called the witnesses forward. Elias stepped up, recounting Mark's actions that night, his voice steady despite fear. Each detail matched the recordings, corroborating the story and tightening the noose around Mark's arrogance. Mark's hands shook. It's not true. This is. Victor cut him off, voice calm but piercing. "Mark, it's all true. Your own words, your own actions. And now, everyone here sees exactly who you are." He turned to the crowd. "Mark Hale is not just a man who betrayed a father, a community, and his own conscience. He is a man who thought he could steal a legacy, manipulate the truth, and walk away unscathed." The cameras captured every twitch, every tear, every moment of Mark's panic. Reporters whispered into microphones, sending live updates to the city, spreading the story like wildfire. Victor stepped closer to Mark. "Do you have anything to say?" Mark's voice cracked. I didn't mean." Victor shook his head. "Meaning doesn't matter. Actions do. And your actions cost a life. My father's life. Your arrogance ends tonight." Police officers stepped in, gently guiding Mark toward the back of the hall. The audience watched, captivated by the full exposure of Mark's crimes. His reputation, power, and lies had collapsed completely, live in front of the town. Victor stood on the stage, looking at the people around him. Relief, awe, and respect were reflected in their faces. His father's legacy was safe, the truth had been revealed, and justice had been served. Victor's mind flashed back to all the months of planning, the sleepless nights, the moments of fear and doubt. Every step, every patient move, had led to this, total vindication. Finally, he whispered to himself, a mixture of grief and triumph, "We did it, Dad. Justice is done. And I will protect what is yours." The sun began to rise outside, casting golden light across the hall. Victor stepped off the stage, breathing in the cool morning air. The city around him was alive, buzzing with the story of the night a predator became prey. Mark was gone, taken away by the authorities, powerless, exposed, and humiliated. And Victor? Victor finally allowed himself to feel peace. Not just the peace of victory, but the peace of balance restored, of truth prevailing, of a legacy honored, and of a son fulfilling his father's unspoken wishes. He looked at the horizon, a calm smile on his face. The chapter had closed. The war was over. And justice had been served. The town would never forget this story. And neither would Victor.